Good evening. You're watching Just the News. I'm Amita Balachandra. We're going to start off with Russia-Ukraine crisis right up the top of the bulletin because the Indian embassy in Ukraine has today asked its nationals, particularly students, to leave Ukraine temporarily and avoid all non-essential travel to the country in view of uncertainties of the current situation. More than 1 lakh Russian troops were positioned near the Ukraine borders, even as the Kremlin has denied plans of any invasion. In the meantime, Russia has now said that it is planning to pull back some of its troops from Ukraine's border. Now, the defense ministry said the large scale drills continued, but that some units were returning to their bases. The BBC reported that there has been no independent confirmation, however, of the withdrawal. Now, Ukraine's foreign minister has reacted to this and he said that they will believe Russia is withdrawing when it sees that this is actually happening on ground. He adds that the diplomatic route Ukraine was pursuing with its allies is working at preventing further escalation. The head of NATO Defense Alliance has said in the meantime that he hasn't seen de-escalation yet, but the signals from Moscow give some cause for optimism. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has also reacted. He said that there are mixed signals coming from Russia and that the intelligence on Ukraine is still and not encouraging. Moving away from the story now to the hijab controversy in the state of Karnataka. The Karnataka High Court is continuing to hear petitions in the High Court. The Muslim girls who've moved Karnataka High Court against hijab ban have argued that wearing the headscarf was an innocent practice of faith and not a mere display of religious jingoism. They also requested the full bench of the High Court to make a leeway to attend classes with headscarves, as the court's interim order, they said, had suspended their fundamental rights. According to ANI, senior advocate Devdutt Kamath, appearing for the petitioner, referred to a judgment of a South Africa court on the issue whether a Hindu girl with roots in South India could wear nose ring in schools. Now, he referred to the judgment which says that this case is not about uniforms but exemptions to existing uniforms. The hearing is set to continue on Wednesday. Schools till the 10th standard have reopened across the state of Karnataka on Monday. Indian Express has reported that in Mandya, students at the Rotary Educational Society school were forced by teachers to remove their hijab before entering school premises. In fact, there were several videos that made the rounds as well, which showed that teachers and staffers were also asked to remove their hijab or burqa before entering the premises of schools. According to a report by the News Minute, it says students chose to return to their homes today without attending schools, many of them, after they were denied permission to wear hijabs inside the school premises by the authorities. Now, the Karnataka High Court has passed, if you remember, an interim order which says that wearing hijabs or any other religious attire like hijab, saffron shawl, etc., are prohibited for students. Meanwhile, according to a report by the New Indian Express, an autonomous postgraduate government college in Madhya Pradesh came out with an order banning wearing hijabs within the college premises after a group of Hindu right-wing outfits protested the wearing of hijab by 2 students on the 14th of February. According to a video on Twitter, a group of people were seen to be chanting Jai Shri Ram and Vande Mataram after 2 hijab-clad students entered college premises. The report also says that the college administration tried to track the 2 students but couldn't because they had already left the college. Moving on to COVID information now coming in from across the country. Assam, for instance, has withdrawn all COVID-related restrictions as of today. According to a report by the PTI, it says from 6 a.m. on Tuesday, all curbs related, including night curfew and restrictions of social religious gatherings, educational institutions, etc., were lifted. However, wearing masks, maintaining social distance, regular hand washing, these things still are applicable. The WHO's Europe Regional Director has warned that the Omicron threat remains high in East Europe. Now, Mr. Hans Klug has said that over the past 2 weeks, cases of COVID have more than doubled in several areas, including Russia and Ukraine. This comes after European countries are hinting at lifting restrictions from next month if the cases go on decreasing. In other news, Ashish Mishra, son of Union Minister Ajay Mishra, and the main accused in the Lakhimpur Kheri case, has now been released from jail. He's the main accused in the killing of protesting farmers in UP's Lakhimpur Kheri last year. 8 people, including 4 farmers and 1 journalist, were killed in the October 3rd Lakhimpur Kheri incident. Meanwhile, a special CBI court today has declared Rashtriya Janata Dal chief Lalu Prasad Yadav guilty in a case pertaining to the fraudulent withdrawal of 139.35 crore rupees from the Randa treasury when he was the Bihar chief minister in the 1990s. Now, Lalu Yadav, who has now been convicted in all 5 fodder scam cases in which he was named as a conspirator, was present in the courtroom today morning as Judge C.K. Shashi read out the verdict. Now, sentencing for Lalu Yadav and the 39 others who were found guilty will take place on the 21st of February. Moving on to business news right now. According to the data by Commerce Ministry, India's trade deficit in January touched $17.42 billion. Now, the country's exports in January has risen to $34.50 billion when compared to $27.54 billion in January 2021, while the imports have risen to $51.93 billion in January. Now, the rise in exports was due to good performance in the engineering, petroleum, and jewelry sectors. On to international news right now. Canadian Prime Minister has said that he has invoked emergency powers to try to quell the protest by truck drivers and others who paralyzed Ottawa and blocked border crossings. Now, the protesters have been agitating against the country's vaccine mandates. Trudeau said that the emergency measures, and I quote, will be time limited, geographically targeted, as well as reasonable and proportionate to the threats they are meant to address, end quote. Moving on to sports news right now, Indian wicketkeeper batter Rishabh Pant was elevated to the role of vice captaincy in the T20Is for the 3-match home series against West Indies, which begins from the 16th of February. Earlier, KL Rahul was named as the vice captain under the captaincy of Rohit Sharma. And one piece of good news before we wrap things up here on this bulletin, and this comes in from New Zealand. New Zealand's parliament today has near unanimously passed a legislation that bans practices intended to forcibly change a person's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, known as conversion therapy. Now, the bill, which makes it a criminal offense to forcibly change a person's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, was passed with 112 votes in favor and 8 votes against it. Such offences would now be subject to up to 3 years of imprisonment. And this is a report according to Reuters. That brings us to the end of this bulletin. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.